I'm from AgriWeb, and much to the distress of our sales team, I actually don't want to talk too much about AgriWeb. We've got a stall in the exhibition hall where you can see us, but I really want to talk more around all these solutions we've been talking about and how to understand and how to dig into what's the right solution for you. And then also talk about some of the different ways of integrating information from all of those different sensors, different applications, etc., to walk through some use cases of how they could work for you. But I will do a little bit of a background just so you've got some context. So we build farm management software primarily based or focused on livestock producers. So nearly all of our customers are mixed operators, so they've got a bit of cropping or fodder as well. And you know, what we see with the pen and paper, that's really the current leading farm management application in the world. And what we're trying to do, and as a group of similar-minded companies to ourselves, is bring that digitization that's touched a lot of other industries into the farming community. And you know, starting off with simple record keeping, we see that as then being able to provide value in terms of audit and compliance, having data-driven decisions happening on farm, and planning tools so you can understand what you're going to be doing through the season, how you interact with with workers on your farm, etc. And the way we do that is by really simple and easy to use management software. Typically an app, it's running on your phone, it's in your pocket with you everywhere you go, works offline, so the types of communication and network issues we've been talking about don't factor in as much. And an example here is we're showing a really nice drag and drop movement between two paddocks for a mob. What we then do on the back end is we crunch numbers around that. So even though we've done a drag and drop that's only taken us a few seconds, we use that information to then say, well, how long was that mob in paddock A for? We can use that to understand paddock utilization. What's the feed availability in paddock B, either manually entered or from some of the satellite tools that we've been talking about? That then lets us understand what how long that mob can be in that paddock for based on its DSE. And that then fills out full livestock and paddock management, multi-user task management, because a lot of the properties obviously have multiple workers on it, or you might just want reminders for yourself. And then details about all of the animals you've got, all of the paddocks you've got, and also full inventory management. And then that data comes off your mobile phone, goes into our cloud-based server, and here's an example of our website, which gives you more of the planning and reporting tools. And we've seen with some quite simple planning tools, this is our operational planner, that producers around the country have been able to see some pretty big increases in productivity. So here's a customer of ours from Tasmania who wasn't aware that he shouldn't be shearing within six weeks after joining, stopped doing that and saw a 20% increase in scanning rates, just by these simple reminders that we're able to put in front of people. That they're oftentimes things that you already know, but it's maybe the reminder in real time that lets you make that decision. And we've been running for about 5 years. We've got 3,000 farmers on 2,000 farms, mainly in the southern part of the country. And I mentioned yesterday, I ran these numbers on Friday, we're running about 9.7 million animals as of today, and about 10 million hectares. We're based up in Sydney. We've got 40 people on staff, about half of those work in the development team with me. And we've got about, 8 people in his farm success or support role as well, because as Kieran was talking about yesterday, a really important piece of these systems as we roll them out isn't just getting the software out or the sensors out and throwing it at the people. It's what do you actually do once it's on farm? How do you actually understand how to use that software, how to support it? In terms of what we're working on next, we're a mob-based system at the moment. We've got a little bit of individual animal function. Last year we acquired a group in the UK called Farm Wizard who have 14 years of individual animal management experience, and we're combining that experience with what we think we're really good at, which is making easy to use, powerful software to bring a full individual management solution, talk to your Gallaghers and your True Tests, etc., but then give you these reports and the visual aspects of what we do in AgriWeb bringing map editing onto the mobile, enterprise reporting and custom reporting. So more for folks that are familiar with AgriWeb to understand what's coming next. But as I said, it's now after that many minutes, it's not about AgriWeb. It's about what's the ag tech landscape look like. And here's a chart that CB Insights put out every year or so of just a handful, just a small 100 of the ag tech solutions that exist around the world. And I find this incredibly overwhelming. There's so much technology, there's so many sensors, pieces of software and other hardware that's coming on farm that it can be really hard to understand what to pick, what's the right thing for you. And so I just want to walk through our thought process around about how you can think about this ag tech plethora of software and solutions. And we go through these exact same kind of processes when we're thinking about internal tools for ourselves. But first of all, identify a problem. Here's a really basic example, but if you're a livestock operation, then cropping software is not going to be useful for that part of your business. So really understand what it is that you want to what do you want to understand about your enterprises and how you then want to use that information to improve them. Consult the oracle of Google. A quick Google search can be really useful to find reviews, etc., that other people have done about their feedback. We always type in name of product, review. Look for the bad ones, look for the good ones. Make your own judgments about them. With the last point, by start a free trial. Most companies like ourselves have a free trial for 14 days or a month. Try it out. Ask questions of the company. Ask them what are the good things, what are the bad things, what's coming up next from them. And ask around. We've got a great community now in farming with technology. Friends of yours probably using or have tried and put down some of these solutions. Reach out to that through that network as well. And some of the specific questions we think are important to ask around, we've got farm management software, but it's really about all the sensors as well we've been looking at over the last day. Is it a desktop app or a mobile app? Does it go with you when you need to, where you need to go? And it's in many cases it's both. Understand what's the function of each of those different applications, because they usually do have different sets of functionality. So again, in our case, record keeping on the mobile phone, reports and planning on the desktop. Does it work offline as well as having online requirements? So a lot of the applications in particular that run on your phone, you'd be wanting something that works with you out in a paddock in case you don't have good connectivity. And then oftentimes you'll see solutions that work offline and then sync to their cloud server when you get back in range. That's absolutely something you need to be looking for. Ease of use is a massive one, and I think a really key one in this particular space. Coming into the ag space as someone who was very much a city boy, I talk to friends and they're like, "Oh, you're working in ag? That's really cool. Do they use computers?" Well, obviously we use computers, but what I've found is farming is very technical. That's what I find really exciting about it. And farmers like yourselves, I don't think you're scared of technology at all. You just don't want something that gets in your way because you're really, really busy. So ease of use is something that we spend a huge amount of time on. Emily, our designer, is down here with me as well. And understanding the types of problems and the types of environments that you work in is really key. I was down around this area 2 years ago. We just shipped our really nifty marking function. We're really proud of it. I came out to talk to some farmers. They're wearing gloves. They're covered in blood. There's a pile of tails next to them. I was getting splattered with blood. I was like, okay, we need to rethink things a little bit because it's really not feasible to be tapping in all these numbers as you go. So those are really key things that there's no substitute for being on the ground. Within AgriWeb, we've got a pretty good split 50-50 between folks that grew up on the land or have studied ag science and folks that have grown up in the city but have a lot of technology experience. And it's a requirement that we've put in since day one that every single person in the technical team has to spend at least a couple of trips or a week out in the field each year to make sure that we're understanding the problems and the conditions and the environments that our software is being used in. Data privacy and ownership is a really key one, and it's something that's come up in a lot of these sessions already. I think it's absolutely critical that you're working with groups who understand that you own your data. Groups like AgriWeb are storing it, we're custodians for it for a period of time, but you own it, we can't share it with anyone. If you want it out, we can take it out. If you want to take it out and then put it into another program, that's completely fine as well. So that's a really important piece, which I think, particularly as this space is developing and the understanding of data and the value of that data is evolving, you need to make sure that the companies you're working with recognise that as well. And that's not just software platforms, that's the sensor companies that are starting to collect that information on your behalf as well. And the types of questions to ask around that, as I mentioned, if I stop using your software, what happens to my data? Can I take it with me? Will you delete it? And another important one, do you sell my data for any purpose? Make sure that you go through the T's and C's of AgriWeb, of other companies that you might be working with, and understand that. And by the way, we don't. But make sure that any other providers you work with have that same respect for your data. Cloud backup and security is a really important one. As most of us have a red notebook in the top, and the number of times that we hear stories about people sticking those in the wash and losing all of that valuable information or data that can't help them make those on-farm management decisions or help them in an audit is really a serious issue and something that comes up a lot. Make sure that data is being stored in the cloud. I think there's an understanding more and more across multiple industries that the cloud isn't a bad thing. We use it every single day in terms of banking, in terms of going to Amazon to buy things, Netflix, etc. It's a really solid way of of storing data nowadays. And also with a lot of the cloud providers out, but Microsoft or Google or Amazon, these are robust systems that run most of the systems within the world now. Security is a really important piece as well, and these are handled at that cloud provider point of view. They've all got pretty good stories around that, but then make sure that the applications that you're using also have that take security as seriously as you want them to, and ask them to explain it. Ask us to explain what we do around security to you guys. Real-time data sharing is a valuable piece of within an application, particularly if you've got multiple workers like I was talking about before. You want to make sure that different people can stay in touch, can stay up to date with what's happening. One of the worst things that we've seen happen with customers where we've had some shortcomings, hopefully previously, is where data gets out of sync and people are double entering information. First of all, you don't want the bad data going in, but if it does go in, how do you rectify that? How do you fix that information up? And this can be, as you can imagine, this can be quite challenging if you're both out in fields and you don't have internet connectivity at the same time. How do you keep in sync? But we find that managing work between workers with tasks, management, etc., can help alleviate some of those issues. And then, all these systems should be delivering more value than they cost. It's a pretty tricky one to quantify sometimes, what's the value of these systems, and particularly when we talk about, well, we'll save you time, how do you quantify that? One of the ways we think about that is if you spend 10 minutes a day on record keeping or using some of these systems, every single day of the year, that adds up to 8 days a week pretty quickly. So what could you do by reducing the amount of time you need to enter that information, to keep that information in sync, to prepare for audits and the like? And if it was 10 minutes and that adds up to 8 days, well, if it's half an hour, which could be, you might have periods where you're doing a lot of intense work to get ready for an audit, and it might be a little bit scattered here and there, that adds up to $22 hours or days a year, which is a pretty huge amount of time. And then once we've got these tools that we've selected to roll out on farm, what do you do with them? Now, most of us would start out living in a silo where it's just the AgriWeb function or just the SensorX function. But really the value of these starts to come when you combine them together. So I'm just going to walk through a few scenarios here. It's not the exhaustive list, but just to start to get the kind of juices flowing in you a little bit. So yeah, as I mentioned, each of these systems has a particular focus, so how do you combine them together? And before I get to that, one of the things that, I've just gone through a number of things you should be thinking about from your management tools or your software tools or your hardware tools. The other thing we look at is when we're looking at a IoT provider or sensor provider, we want to make sure that those same characteristics that we're hoping and that we judge ourselves against are reflected in that partner. So are they storing their data in a secure way? Your data in a secure way? Are they respecting your privacy? Do they provide value back to you? And then really importantly, do they have good customer support and good customer support processes? If an issue comes in, then it's probably going to get picked up by AgriWeb. We need a way to escalate that to the hardware provider if we identify it's an issue with them, and we need to make sure that gets actioned quickly and then get resolved for you. And we talked a little bit in some of the other speeches around open data standards. Open data standards are ways that are published which allow different applications to talk to one another through really standard protocols. And the power with those is, it means if you're using AgriWeb and you pull your data out of AgriWeb, you can stick it somewhere else and it's going to work in that system as long as they're using the same type of standards that we're using. One of the challenges we have in the farming space in general, and particularly in the livestock space, is that there aren't a lot of standards around at the moment. In the livestock, or in the animal standard side of the world, a lot of the existing standards have come from dairy production, and they're now having to update to bring in some of the meat production type of records. But it's an area where we see more and more activity, particularly with some groups like ICAR, which is the International Committee for Animal Recording. There's some great work that's been done in New Zealand around farm data standards over there, and MLA are looking at how they can learn from both of those types of experiences to define something for Australia. So some of those scenarios then, and some of these are current examples and some of these are future examples, and some of them are just like, wouldn't it be nice if we could do X? We have an integration, so we have a feature in AgriWeb which allows you to store rainfall. Typically it's manually entered every single day, but that's a lot of extra work, as we talked about. You have to drive out to the gauge, or you have to find the gauges, write that down. The beauty of a system like AgriWeb and these other farm management systems is where we can capture that information automatically for you. So we've got an integration with a group called FarmBot. They do rainfall as well as tank readings. Right now we're just bringing in the rainfall readings. Excuse me. And then that's happening, that's getting updated every single day. And now you've got up-to-date hyperlocal, as we try to talk about it, hyperlocal readings for your property and the rainfall on it. This is an example where we've got a preliminary interface out. You might hear the term API as well. That's an application programming interface, basically a way that two systems talk to one another. So we've got an API around that's a bit of a prototype. We'd be looking to standardize that or use some existing weather station standards. So there's a big one out of the US called Open Ag Data Alliance, or OADA, and how we can then bring that information through from the variety of sensors we've been looking at over the last day. We were talking previously around some drone imagery to bring in potentially pasture and feed on offer information. Again, we've got a prototype with a group called SIBO Labs, who kind of grew out of Spatial Hub and FarmMap 4D, and then have moved into their own way of working. They've got access to similar satellites as Pastures from Space, etc. have, where 5-day, 10-meter res, 13-band imagery comes through. That feeds into AgriWeb, which then drives two features within AgriWeb. It's a visual map of the feed on offer, and also grazing plans, which, as I said before, let you know when you should move animals out. The exciting bit then is when you combine that information with plate meters, soil moisture readings, etc. So you can start to have more hyperlocal, again, data driving those models within a system like AgriWebb to give you more accurate predictions and measurements of pasture growth, on pasture. And here's an example of what SIBO looks like for one of the farms we visited yesterday. Also, and we've talked a lot about data and interoperability in the instance of sensors, but there's a lot of other data and recipients of data as well. So ENVD is an example of this, where information captured in a farm management platform creates an ENVD. We'll be updating NLIS with our individual management system as well. So again, making life easier and taking away some of the additional administration that you need to do. That extends if we're looking at online sales platforms, and a system like AgriWebb can provide some information through to sales platforms to both list stock, to purchase stock. If you want to buy stock as well, see them, identify the animals that you want to buy. If you're doing a trade sale, and they come through ideally with a history of everything that's previously happened with them into a farm management system. What we see in the UK is a real interest in integrated supply chains. So we have a product over there called Supply Chain Manager, where that individual animal data that's being captured at a farm management level is being then available to processors to understand, or stock agents to understand the kind of reliability and consistency of their supply. I think importantly, what we see in the UK is many more integrated supply chains, so there's really value coming back to the farmer in terms of premium prices for sharing that type of information. And the system we have in the UK as well, data comes in from other farm management systems to then provide that visibility, because we don't expect everyone to be using AgriWebb, though sure, wouldn't that be nice? And then closing the loop of kill sheet information coming back to the farmer, so they can then have that extra information to understand their management practices. Just a few ideas to start thinking about. Definitely think through when you're selecting any technology to come onto farm through items like this. If you want to see the full buyer's guide that we've put together, just Google AgriWebb Buyer's Guide. And thanks a lot for your time.